Hello, friends, and welcome to the very last episode of Season 2 of the On the Venue podcast. As we wrap up both the season and the year, I want to thank you for coming on this adventure with me. Speaking of adventures, our final guest of the season is my friend Olivia. Olivia made the decision to hike the Appalachian Trail this past year, and I was very fortunate enough to have followed along with her journey via Slack. Through this app, she was able to share with her friends and family the highs and lows, pictures from the trail, and even insights as to what she was going through both mentally and physically. It was as if she was writing in a journal that she gave all of us access to, and I thank her so much for her openness and her vulnerability. At the time of the recording, Olivia had just returned from a road trip as she and her boyfriend Zach were trying to decide where they would like to live next. He's from Ohio, she's from Pennsylvania, and they met on the trail and they're ready for their next adventure. When I checked in with her this week if they had decided on a what's next, she said the door is still wide open and life is still up in the air. I personally remember going through this exact same self-reflection when coming back from teaching English in Germany after college. I was trying to decide between Austin or Philly, and it just came down to the fact that I had more friends still living in Philly, and I thought it might actually be easier to find a job. I fell in love with Philly when I moved back, and I'm sure that Olivia and Zach will love wherever they end up, knowing that Philly and Ohio will always be here when and if they decide to come back. Right before recording this intro, I got a text message from Olivia telling me that she finally tried Cincinnati's famous Skyline chili. She approves, and she says it seems like an excellent hangover meal. And their chili dogs, she rates 10 out of 10. I know she wasn't sold on the concept of chili served over spaghetti, but maybe if it was paired with the right wine? Speaking of wine, grab that bottle of bubbly and cheers to ringing in a new year. I wish you all a wonderful and joyous 2022. Thanks so much for listening to Beyond the Venue podcast and enjoy the following episode, The Beauty of Trail Magic and Tramilies, Hospitality on the Appalachian Trail with Olivia Lindstrom. My guest today is Olivia Lindstrom. She is both a sommelier and a bartender. And my friend Liv here went the most beyond the venue over this past year as she recently completed in early October, hiking the entire Appalachian Trail. So we are going to be talking a lot about her experiences. How are you doing today, Liv?
I'm doing great. I'm really excited to be here, and I'm excited to do a podcast with you.
I'm really excited we were able to make this happen because you just got back, and I think we got to see you for the first time in October, and you joined us for our annual mini golf tournament. And just got to catch up in person a little bit. And I'm like, oh my God, I have to have you on the show. Like your story is so great. And we'll get into it later in the episode. But, really the fact that you started a Slack channel while you were on the trail to not just, update the parents of like, I am alive. I was not eaten by a bear today. Everything is okay. But just to hear your stories was such an incredible experience. And I can't believe you lived it because I was lucky enough just to listen to it. So I'm excited to be able to give you a platform so you can share the stories with our audience today.
Yeah, thank you. I'm excited to talk about it.
So we only just met, I want to say April of 2020. Is that when you first moved to Philadelphia?
So I didn't move to Philly until July.
It's a blur. It was 2020. So how... I know that, we know one another through Brandon Thrash, our season 1, episode 1 from Beyond the Venue podcast. How did you end up in Philadelphia? Because you moved here from Pittsburgh.
Yes. So I actually met Brandon at a cocktail conference in San Antonio. And I think I was at a time where I kind of plateaued in the Pittsburgh market, and I got what I needed out of, food and beverage there. And I was looking to move to a bigger city, and I think over a couple of beers Brandon offered me a job, and I was like, haha, we're drunk, like this isn't a serious offer. And it ended up being a serious offer, and I had visited Philly I think right at the end of February because it was right before things started to shut down. And on my way out there, I was visiting my family, and my twin brother had told me that they were expecting a baby as well. So it motivated my move a little bit more.
And they're just outside Philadelphia in Berks County, right?
Exactly.
I think your hometown is the same town where, did you grow up in Ole?
Yes.
Okay, so that's where we get our delicious vegetables from Taproot Farm. that I talk about in my episode with Hillary Ray.
That's great. I didn't know that.
Most delicious vegetables.
About my hometown. That's great. Yeah, so I think I had two motivations for moving to Philly. I spent my entire adulthood in Pittsburgh, so it was definitely like a little nerve-wracking, even though I was going to be closer to like my hometown. So I had.
And you had moved to Pittsburgh for school, right? For college.
Yep. And then I was there for about 8 years, and then yeah, moving out to Philly, it was like I had told my roommates I was moving, found a sublet. At the time, I was president of Pittsburgh's USBG chapter, and
that's a U.S. Bartenders Guild?
Yes. And I resigned from that position, had everything figured out. Brandon offered me the spare room in 1900, and then everything.
For our listeners, this probably comes up a couple times, but a group of our friends it's been a rotating door of folks living in 1900 Carpenter, which they're all going to be moving out next week as they go on to different adventures and chapters in their lives. But even Ben and Lauren, our guests from earlier this season, had a brief stint there. So it's definitely going to be missed.
Yeah, that's too funny.
And good thing you guys are all moving out, since we just shared your home address with the listeners. No one that we know will be living there anymore.
Please welcome anyway. It's a compliment. Yeah, so that move to Philly it was a great, I guess, growing pain for me, especially because when I got there was no job, there was no restaurant to be opened, unfortunately. I'm glad that I had such a great support system with the friends that I did get to meet in Philly. But I think that was like a lot of anxiety and like kind of like loss of purpose, I guess.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Especially, I feel like the hospitality industry, and especially like not high level bartending in particular, but what I had my goals set on was like a very far 5-year plan. And like I knew from, step by step where I was going to go in a span of a year, and for all that to just disappear.
Blow up. Yeah.
It was like, okay, well, I guess I'm going to have to figure out what I'm feeling right now and like how to even deal with that. So it was an interesting move. I'm glad that I did it, and I met amazing people and had a good support system through not only the pandemic, but then being unemployed and dealing with all of the emotions from that. So.
And were you able to get unemployment? Did that system work out for you?
Yeah, luckily I had absolutely no problems doing that. So I know I'm one of the lucky ones.
It sounded like an absolute nightmare. But we were super lucky to have you, and I guess we got to spend more time with you virtually on those Saturday night quizzos as your house would be hosting some from time to time, and sometimes you guys were just fellow participants as well. But it was really nice to see you kind of build up this little family with the roommates, because it's, everybody kind of had their own, their living situation when we were in complete lockdown. So whether it was a partner or roommates or, folks who live by themselves, like I think everybody had their pluses and minuses of what they were trying to process when you couldn't go anywhere.
Yeah.
But I know you guys were able to you also did some nature vacations as well. So I know you had our circle of friends, a lot of people enjoy going backpacking and camping. And so you definitely kind of got your first, pre-Appalachian Trail by going on some trips throughout 2020. Where all did everybody go?
So we went up to the Catskills, and then also the Dolly Sods in West Virginia. Those were really my first 2 backpacking trips, and they weren't very long. It was like 3 miles of hiking with our packs, and we set up camp for the weekend and did day hikes. But it was kind of my first taste of putting on a full pack and going out. And I think sitting by one of those campfires, probably another alcohol-fueled conversation. But Brandon and then our other friends, Rick and Jules, were also there. And they kind of, I knew Brandon had hiked the AT, and, talking to Jules, another woman who had done it, like kind of really instilled like I don't know, some motivation and inspiration in me. I'm like, man, like that's so badass. Like I am right now in a huge transition in my life, and I love the outdoors, and it's one thing that I think I could just, set my mind to, another goal of mine. But it's like, okay, I think I'm going to do this.
So this wasn't on your radar. Clearly the Appalachian Trail was not in your original 5-year plan. So now in the shift, we're going beyond the venue. So I don't think I realized that it was on one of these camping trips, like being with 3 people who had spent time on the trail, Brandon having completed all of it, most of it. Are we? We're going to give them all of it.
Yeah.
So, and I know Rick and Jules had just done a majority of it, but did skip some parts here and there. But even still, to just have that experience, it's unlike anything else. So we'll, hearing your story. So one of the things that Rick and Jules and Brandon had talked a lot about, trail magic, this concept of trail magic. And I loved your mention offline. You called it hospitality outside the venue. And I absolutely love that. So can you share with our listeners what is trail magic and what were some of the most memorable trail magic experiences that you had?
Sure. So while you're hiking along this over 2,000-mile trail, there's road crossings, and people who have previously hiked the trail, people who are just living in the area will bring like food and snacks and drinks for you, just as a little treat of things that we won't get while we're actually hiking. And most of the time it's beer, soda. There was one time somebody was making pancakes for us. Trail magic that stands out the most is right after the Smoky Mountains, there's a place called Max Patch. It's this huge, beautiful, bald mountain, 360 views. It's absolutely a stunning place to go visit. Highly suggest. But there was a couple of cars sitting at the parking lot right before you take the climb up the hill. And they said that they had hiked the trail in 2011, I believe. But they were handing out beer and like some snacks and candy. And I guess they were about to leave, and I was hiking with my friend Freshly Baked. And I guess we just looked like the type of people that enjoyed mushrooms. So they gave us 2 baggies of shrooms to take with us for our venture up Max Patch, because we were camping on the top and we were going to be there for sunset and sunrise. So that was very, very funny. His question to us was, "Do you guys eat drugs?" And we were like,
Sure.
Sure. So that one definitely
when in Rome.
Yeah, right. So that was definitely a funny, memorable thing. It's like this very trusting, tight knit community of like past and present through hikers. So I think they were excited to just be a part of like our experience. Other than that, it really was trail magic throughout the entire trail for us. I don't think we went through a state without running into somebody that was, taking the time and their money to provide something for us that, could have turned our whole days around. I know there was definitely days in the middle of the summer where running into a cooler of Gatorade probably like saved my mental health for sure, because it got hard when you're hiking all day in 100-degree heat, and you're then filtering your own water, and you find a tasty beverage along the trail is definitely a game changer.
So how did you prepare for all this? Kind of how did things look in the very beginning?
So definitely the first thing was the gear checklist, making sure you have everything that you need to go and live outside for 6 months. That took a lot of research and obviously talking to my friends who had previously hiked. But that is a lot of money to begin with. And then saving additional money for the food. And if you decide to get off the trail and go into town for like hotels or hostels or something like that, that was a big thing to keep in mind. And then I guess just mentally preparing myself to go through like an environment that I had never put myself in. I really, really do enjoy pushing myself to my limits, making sure I'm constantly putting myself outside my comfort zone, because I think that really helps me grow as a person, whether it is with a career, hospitality in general, or this was just something completely different for me. And then mentally and physically, pushing myself outside of that comfort zone. I don't know. I took in everybody's advice that had done it previously. I know I went to REI and there was a previous thru hiker who was giving me advice, and he was like, next day it rains, go walk outside for 3 miles and just see how you do, like around the city. And I was like, okay. And he's like, make sure you drive below the speed limit because you're going to realize that life goes so much slower than you're used to. So that's one little advice that I'll have you, like, be patient. And I was like, no, I'll be patient. But that was definitely some advice that I was like, oh man, like I'm not getting to the place I need to get to tonight. And I just remind myself of what that guy told me. Like, take a deep breath and enjoy the walk, I guess.
And you also had made the decision to do this on your own. So I know like everybody's got kind of like their different journey. And I think, Rick and Jules had one another and as a married couple, and Brandon hiked with a friend of his.
Right.
But, you meet people along the way. And so I believe that in order to kind of help jumpstart your journey, that Brandon hiked the first 2 weeks with you. Is that right?
Only a week. He did the first 80 miles with me. Him and Hulk, who he hiked with when he did the trail back in 2015. They started the trail, and it was a really nice segue into making sure I was comfortable. I didn't have to replace any gear in the first week, so that was triumphant for me. But yeah, it was nice to have somebody there before, like, I was constantly seeing the same people and getting to build my own relationships. So that was nice. Although he did push me pretty hard in the beginning and my knees did hurt. So I'm a little skeptical if it actually helped.
Well, I think he was also able to help facilitate some new friendships.
Yeah.
I think it's, it's kind of, I'm envisioning kind of like that first day at a new school, or like freshman orientation, or, starting a new job where, okay, I'm going to be doing this thing for the next 6 months. And, what was your approach, or like, how was it? Like, was it just, I can imagine that everybody's super friendly. And you're not going to meet, I feel like there's just a certain type of person that's like, I'm going to do this.
Yeah, absolutely.
You're finding your people. And so, your trail family, or what did y'all call it?
A tramily.
A tramily. Yeah. So how did your tramily evolve? And I know that you would have like a little tighter knit with a larger knit that we would get to meet.
Absolutely. So, I mean, like you kind of said, it's like freshman orientation and like your freshman dorm, basically, because you are like going and sleeping in the same exact spot with people every single day. And you finally like start to see the people you're keeping the same pace with. So those are the people you're seeing every day, having lunch with, eating dinner, waking up, having breakfast. And we really started to form our trail family through the Smoky Mountains, because you had to stay in the shelters in the national parks. So that was always just like 20 people in one space, crowded under a shelter.
Yeah, can you share with our listeners what is meant by like a shelter on the trail?
Sure. So they're basically lean-tos. They're not very big. They're meant to sleep 6 to 12 people, depending on how big they are. And they're spread out maybe, depending on where you are along the trail, like 5 to 10 miles apart. So depending on your pace and how far you want to hike, it's a nice, like, good mileage for the day for you to go from one shelter to the next. And it's nice. There's usually privies there, so you get the luxury of an outdoor toilet. But yeah, so our trail family started to kind of form right along the Smokies, and then right afterwards, the same thing I was talking about, Max Patch, we camped with a group of people that I actually ended the trail with. So that was the formation. And then there ended up being about 20 of us in my extended trail family, and then 5 of us who hiked together for basically the entire time.
And I love this concept of trail names. And so your trail name is after my own heart, Mayo. We both have a very deep love affair for mayonnaise. So how did you get your trail name?
So something I actually started before I hiked the trail is I used to keep condiment packets in my fanny pack, even like in normal life. And I decided like mayonnaise was going to be the most practical thing to carry with me, and I love it so much. So every meal, even in things that it didn't really make sense to go into, like ramen, for example, uh, and people just decided like this girl is obsessed with her mayonnaise, so she's Mayo. So trail names definitely come from some sort of silly story that happens on trail. So mine was mayonnaise.
I love that, and I mean, and it makes sense because I'd love to hear kind of what do you eat on the trail? Like, as you've got 6 months, and so we'd kind of get the stories of um the trail magic, or like we went into town, so it's like I had a burger, and I'm sure it was just this you know side of the road, but it's the greatest thing you've had because like it didn't come freeze dried, or you didn't have to make it yourself, and it was just this glorious little luxury. But it seems like mayonnaise is a very smart way to pack on the calories, because I know that was something you had shared a lot of that with us on the Slack, and looking to folks who had hiked before for advice on how to get more calories, because you had mentioned that you'd just find yourself sometimes just not being hungry, and I kind of what did you eat, and what did you struggle with, and kind of how did you overcome a lot of this?
So yeah, the biggest struggle with food is you're burning 4 to 6,000 calories a day. And if you try to imagine how much food that is in your everyday life, if in your normal diet, it's a lot of food. And then you have to carry it with you on the trail. So yeah, we were trying to find the best ways, like most calories per ounces basically. And my mantra was calories and condiments. Um, but yeah, ramen was a big one for dinner, those Northside rice packets. And then Pop Tarts and donuts were a lot for breakfast. Sugar was a big thing. Like your body definitely, you realize how much you crave salt and sugar when you're basically depriving your body of what it needs. And I think I really struggled with that too. It was almost frustrating. Like I've always had a pretty good relationship with food, and like it got to a point where I felt like I was like binging when I got to town, and then like depriving myself, and that like not mentally like threw me for a loop, but was definitely, yeah, I guess it was a mental struggle, because it was like I'm trying to take care of my body, finish this journey, and this isn't something that like I want to struggle with. This should be the easy part because I'm supposed to be hungry, but like you said, like I had lost my appetite, and I wasn't sure if that was just being dehydrated. There was a lot of back and forth on the Slack, a lot of suggestions from friends about like what that could have been from. But I finally got to a point where like I was feeling hungry and could eat whatever, but there was a little bit stint during the summertime that I was really, really struggling, and keeping the weight on. I'm a small person, like losing that much weight was not easy for me. And, that just becomes another exhaustive thing that I had to deal with, past trying to make miles and finish in a certain amount of time. And so I don't know, definitely appreciated those burgers when we got off. Yeah.
And I feel like y'all had a couple periods during the summer where you definitely got to enjoy some delicious food. So we were able to see you and finally meet several members of your Tramily when we took the trip in June to the Blue Ridge Mountains. And I was impressed because our friend Sarah, who was one of your roommates, she spent a lot of time and effort looking at different opportunities in that entire region of like, okay, we're all going to be fully vaccinated. Liv is hiking the trail. Like, let's see what we can work out. And I couldn't believe how perfectly your time on the trail lined up exactly with where we were staying.
It was incredible.
I mean, I also love the fact that I like physically drove over like that parking lot that you're talking about where trail magic happens. Like having driven past that parking lot and driving past the trail, I'm like, okay, I am now a section hiker because I have passed the trail. And I did make the same joke about Katahdin when we went to Maine in September 2020, and Bob and I drove and could see the mountain in the
Hmm.
distance. And even when we were in Maine this past September and I could see the presidentials, and I'm like, oh, that's what they mean by the presidentials. I had no idea. And like those bumper stickers that said I climbed Mount Washington, I'm like, I don't, for honestly, between you and me and our listeners, I always thought those bumper stickers referred to the incline in Pittsburgh.
I did have some Pittsburgh friends make jokes about that.
I don't think it okay, yeah, full disclosure, it wasn't until we had this little hike in Maine this past September, saw the presidential, saw Katahdin from like very far away, that it all clicked.
Hey,
So it was a
Mount
big
Washington in
TIL.
Pittsburgh was the only Mount Washington in my mind until this year too. So don't worry. I had no idea.
So I know that I wasn't able to meet your entire 20-person extended tramily while we were in Virginia, but y'all would all descend upon our great city of Philadelphia for 4th of July weekend, which it was it was amazing because we had, 4th of July of 2015 was the first time we all met Brandon Thrash. And so to have, just this explosion of through hikers y'all had what, 15 people staying in your basement or something? It was insane. It was I thought it was one of the coolest things ever, and everybody was so lovely. And I was glad that everybody was able to take advantage of this and spend a couple days, get some showers, and eat some delicious foods. And I also felt terrible that y'all did not get to see the fireworks.
We saw some.
Did you see some? Okay.
Yeah, how that came to fruition was kind of funny because I had planned, I think almost a month before the 4th, like I invited everybody up to Philly for the 4th of July. And I was like, oh, only a few people are going to come. It depends on where everybody's at on the trail. It's, putting no pressure on anybody. And I was like, I'll get an Airbnb too, just in case, like, Sarah and Dan are doing something else in 1900. And, we get up to Harper's Ferry the last day in June, and my boyfriend Zach was sick and in a hotel room, and I'm texting Sarah about it, and she's like, well, we'll drive down and come get you guys today. And I was like, well, there's 15 of us down here. I don't know how that's going to work. So she texted Brandon, and then we also texted Rick. So the three of them ended up driving down to Harper's Ferry 2 days before we were even planning on going up to Philadelphia. So they took that 5-hour round trip just to pick up 12 of us. And then somebody took my car back down to get the rest of them the next day. But we all descended a little bit earlier, but it was very funny. Like, it's again, like this community of previous through hikers, and also like our community in Philly it's just heartwarming to know that I have this system of people who will literally drive 5 hours to come help me out, and it was wonderful. It was a great time. I'm glad that they got to see the wonderful city of Philadelphia and meet all of you guys, and we got a little break from the trail, a little bit longer than we had intended, but yeah, it was awesome.
And you mentioned your boyfriend Zach, who you met on the trail, who is originally from Cincinnati, and so when I got to meet him in Virginia, I said, okay, as soon as you get to Philadelphia, I'm going to make you guys up a batch of Cincinnati chili. And it was a pretty easy recipe. I'm not going to lie. You're just kind of dumping stuff in a pot and calling it a day. But it was such like an easy, also inexpensive meal that, I was happy to be able to do something nice for you guys.
I'm a little skeptical about the chili on spaghetti, but I have yet to actually go to Skyline, so I'll make my final decision after that.
It is an interesting decision, but I mean, for me personally, growing up in Texas, I grew up with Frito pie. So to me, chili on top of Fritos covered in cheese, and they serve that in our elementary school cafeteria. It's
I think that was a fun thing too, like meeting all of these people on trail from all over the country, and then learning like the little tiny like dialects and food preferences and home cooking. We had somebody in our tramily, his parents got an Airbnb for us up in New York, and it was fun meeting like his family and like what they have for traditions, because they were making a holiday out of it since we had missed a couple holidays on the trail like Easter and stuff. So I don't know, it was really exciting we all have very similar mindsets on the trail, but we're all wildly different people from different backgrounds. So kind of like the service industry, it felt like a
oh, for
little
sure.
misfit toy group of people who like love each other and accept you for all of your faults. And I don't know, definitely made the trail easier in the fact that I had these people who were going through the same thing that I was going through, and I could confide in and find comfort in knowing that I wasn't alone even when I was alone.
And that was one of the things that I wanted to ask you about, because you had mentioned that you're spending time with hiking with your tramily, but at the same time there's a lot of opportunity to just be alone with your thoughts, and how that must have gotten really difficult. So not just how did you deal with that, but also what just kept you going in general?
Sure. So a lot of people listen to music, podcasts, audiobooks on the trail. I unfortunately broke my headphones in Virginia, the longest section of the trail. It's over 500 miles. So I was alone with my thoughts for 10 hours every day. Because a lot of times, like, we don't actually physically hike together. Like, we'll plan a meeting spot for lunch and then where we're going to camp that night. So a lot of the time it is just walking by yourself. And I don't know, it was a good experience to take the time to really sit with like the past year that had just happened with the pandemic. Also sitting with like why I threw myself so hard into the service industry and leaving very little free time for myself, and kind of accepting that I am such a goal oriented and type A person when it comes to like work and my career, and kind of like being able, like forcing myself basically to take a step back from that and like evaluate what what my time means to me, and like how I want to value that time, and whether it is like 100% putting myself towards my career, even if it is like shitty sometimes, if that's something that I do want to do, or if it's I have always needed to work on my life and work balance. So I don't know, it was really a good experience to sit with those thoughts and like have those uncomfortable feelings about yourself, because a lot of people don't allow themselves to take the time to do that, because it's uncomfortable, it sucks, but I had to do it. There was nothing I could only think about so much. So I feel like having to get to learn about myself with myself, and only that, was a really, really good experience for me. Yeah, it was nice to take inventory of my life and, trying to decide where I go from here. But that kept me going every day, just being able to like, it was exciting to be able to like have that time. And then getting back to my cat, I know we had talked about that. I had left him in Philadelphia.
Our cat Poe is just hysterical. Poe will stand on his hind legs, and it's just a super tall cat. And the pictures of Poe are always super fantastic.
He does have his own Instagram, so I should share that with you. So
absolutely,
follow. And then I just think, I wasn't done the further I got on the trail. Like it felt like I still needed to learn more about me and like how I deal with hardship, and the physical hardship definitely brings out the emotional hardship as well. We talked about the presidentials. I'll say hardest part of the trail for me physically. And when you're feeling that physical pain and you're trying to mentally push yourself. I think that takes a lot of perseverance and patience with your own strength and your own humanity, I guess. So I thought that, I'm getting this far. I need to finish this, and it'll feel like I accomplished something that I set out to go do. And it was a little bit of a relief getting up to Katahdin and touching that sign. I think we had all hit our breaking points sometime in Maine. It was beautiful, but at some point it's tired of sleeping in the woods. And
I'm sure it's starting to get cold too, because that was one of the things that we were hearing, from you, that it's hard to read just as a friend of having to push yourself so you can get to the end before it's 4 degrees in Maine, and okay, I have to hike X amount of miles each day. And it sounds like, so I would now learn that the presidentials, it's the different mountain range that I guess it goes through New Hampshire and on. Yeah. Are they only in New Hampshire, or does it go through Maine?
Yeah,
okay.
So it's part of the White Mountain National Forest. So that takes up a pretty big section in New Hampshire, but it gets up to 6,000 feet, a little bit above that. So the elevation is pretty high. We saw snow. It was incredible and cold. But yeah, you have to just keep telling yourself, if I don't get up and hike these miles and get to where I need to be, I can get off trail. It's easy to just get off the trail at the next road crossing and go home. But, I didn't feel like I was going to feel done until I touched that sign on top of Katahdin. So
totally understand.
That's type A personality.
I hear you. So one of the most intense stories that we would hear from you was towards the end. Can you share with our listeners this whole experience of you are too small, you cannot cross this river. This whole experience, where were you? What happened? How did the group get across? Sure. It was straight up Oregon Trail fording the river. Really? I need to sell my oxen to be able to not get dysentery. Where were you? What happened?
So for people who aren't familiar, there is a section in Maine called the 100-Mile Wilderness. The only road crossings through that 100 miles are logging roads. So it's basically, you can't go to town. You can't get off the trail. There's absolutely no cell service there. It's basically the most primitive part of the trail. There is a nice big sign at the beginning saying, "You're entering the 100-mile wilderness. Be prepared for 10 days. Have your provisions." It's a little scary, but so we had left Monson, Maine, a little bit later in the day than we had initially thought we would, and half of our group had stayed behind because they needed a couple more things from the store, and they didn't get on trail until later. Unfortunately, it was 3 days of rain from when we had left town to basically halfway through the 100-mile wilderness. They don't build bridges over any water sources there in the 100-mile wilderness. Instead, they are building new privies, which I appreciate, but they're also all handicap accessible because they're from government grants, which I find to be a little hilarious.
Yes, that tracks. Mm-hmm.
I was we could use this wood for a footbridge, but so we had crossed, me and Skipper, or Zach, my boyfriend, we were hiking by ourselves for the first 2 days, and we had crossed a few rivers the first day, and the last one we did at night, and it was pretty treacherous. It was basically up to my waist, and we kind of had to Spider-Man across some boulders that were underwater, but it was definitely not a smart idea. We really should not have done it. But it had rained pretty hard overnight, and our friends were on the other side because they had left a little bit later. They unfortunately were lucky to be alive in a non-ironic way. They both got swept into the water, unfortunately, because it is pretty insane rapids where there are parts in the river crossings that will catch you and take you down stream a little bit, but they were both lucky to not get hurt, get out unscathed, maybe a couple of bumps and bruises, but that was pretty intense to hear after the fact. They have some videos, which is absolutely insane. That same day, while they were going through that water crossing, we had to go through normally it's pretty wide, but like shallow. It's normally only up to like your shins, my knees for me, since I'm pretty short. They did have a ridge runner sitting at that water crossing, which is somebody who just maintains the trail. They get a section that they normally just go up and down to the different shelters. And she said, okay, like 10 people have crossed today. If I could go back and give them advice, I would tell them not to do it. She looks at me, she's like, you guys can try, but I really, really suggest that you do not do it. It's 3 feet high, which I'm only 5 foot. That's over half of my body. Zach started to go across just to see how deep it did get. And it was up to his waist, which would have been basically up to my chest. And that meant we were not crossing the river, because once it gets that high, you have zero center of gravity in order to maintain any sort of footing. You'll get swept out, and I didn't think that was worth it. So we camped on the closer side of the river and waited. It went down, it receded very quickly, so we were lucky to get up the next morning and be able to link up with our friends who had been behind us and then also cross that river. But it was definitely the wilderness, I will say. It was one of the scariest parts of the trail. One of the most trying. I did cry a lot those first 3 days in the 100-mile wilderness, because you're so close and you're going through like the hardest part and some of the most ridiculous terrain. So that was definitely mentally challenging, I would say, because it's the last little push to the end, and you don't want to give up, but you also don't want to be soaking wet for 3 days and walking in wet shoes. So that was.
Did you reflect back on that advice you had gotten from the thru hiker that you met at REI about walking in the rain? Did that pop into your head a lot?
I was like, I should have walked in the rain for 3 days straight to feel like I'm feeling right now. But I don't know. There are always like bright moments in the day when you have to find some humor in like the shit storm that you're going through. There are bogs throughout like New Hampshire and Maine. And I know it got to the one point we're getting poured on. It's cold. We're walking across these planks that prevent you from going into the bogs. And I didn't realize the trail had been rerouted at a certain point, and I stepped on the plank and went waist down into the bog. And I just all I could do was laugh, because at that point it was like, there's nothing else I can do. So, I got to find the humor in the tough times, because otherwise we wouldn't have made it, I'm sure. But
man. So we're going to switch gears a little bit. We had talked offline a lot about mental health, and you had shared with me that you had several healthy but also unhealthy ways that you've coped over the years with your anxiety and depression. And so, obviously, you can only prepare yourself at so much for the trail, but I'm sure you also had to kind of adapt on the fly and process on the fly and kind of figure out how you're going to keep your sanity over 6 months. So what are some ways that you cope?
Sure. So I think previous to the trail, some unhealthy things that I definitely did was alcohol is obviously an easy way to avoid any sort of issue you're having, and can also exacerbate it. But I think kind of drowning myself in my work, which also dealt with beverage, made me feel accomplished, but yet I was definitely avoiding facing, those things that I did need to take the time to sit with, that I got the opportunity to do on trail. So I think that was the exciting thing about the trail, is because there's very limited alcohol while you're out there hiking, and there's no way to just have a a deflective mechanism. It was definitely like, you got to face things straight on. And yeah, that was definitely interesting. And not that I felt guilty for the way that I've dealt with my mental health in the past, but it's eye-opening to realize that you're always looking for better opportunities to help yourself. And I think that's a great thing that I learned. And I'm hoping that it becomes more commonplace to have those conversations and realize that we can do better for ourselves and our peers. And I think it was great to have, again, a network. I think the healthy way was having a network and a community to feel comfortable having those conversations, because it's not always easy. And when people are going through the same thing that you are, you find a little bit more comfort in that, especially when it's hard topics like anxiety and addiction and depression. And people are my happy place.
And I would think that you probably experienced a lot of group therapy on the trail, that I'm sure there's a lot of, sharing and talking, and because, while the rest of us are sitting at home binging everything on Netflix and, Ted Lasso and what have you, which, speaking of, I heard didn't you say you just finished Ted Lasso?
I finished it last night, speaking about making mental health commonplace and having those conversations. That last episode, I was like,
how many tissues did you go through? Because
so many. So many. What an excellent TV show. That was great.
Such a wonderful series. Yeah.
Again, we didn't have anything like that to distract ourselves. It really is just going out in the woods, even hiking in general, I think is a great therapeutic thing to have. I think it's walking outside and just taking the time for yourself to enjoy being in a different atmosphere than your work or your home. And it's, no distractions besides nature is great for the mind. I think especially after being stuck inside for a year.
And I mean, your pictures were amazing. I'm sure you just saw the most incredible views of your entire life. And there was the concept of a blaze. I had not heard that before, but you kept sharing the blaze of the day. What is a blaze?
So because the Appalachian Trail is one through trail all the way from Georgia to Maine, you follow the white blazes. So every single tree or rock along the AT, it's probably every 10 feet there's a blaze. So I would take pictures of my surroundings where there was one little white blaze. There are also additional blazes, or I guess through hiking slang we have. So a blue blaze is something that would go off the trail to a view or an overlook. And then we have something called yellow blazing, where instead of hiking, you went to the road, got in a car, drove down the road to the next road crossing, and then got back on the trail there, which no shame to anybody who did that. I think we have a saying called hike your own hike. It's what you need to get out of it and nothing more. There's a lot of, anything else, there's a lot of judgment and pretension in the hiking community.
The purist versus...
Right. So I ended up skipping 100 miles. I got sick in the middle of the trail, and I had to get off because I was losing too much weight, had some digestive issues. Talk about a mental battle. I felt so crappy sitting at home, watching my friends hike through Pennsylvania, my home state. I'm missing out. FOMO is still a thing, even when you're just jealous of people hiking. So that was an interesting battle for myself. But we had yellow blazing. People also called green blazing when you smoke marijuana. Pink blazing is when you basically have the same, you're trying to have the same mileage as somebody else you're interested in on the trail. So Zach and I will joke that we pink blaze each other. For the audience, I did meet my boyfriend on the trail. He was one of the very first people I met while hiking. It was day 8 for me. So after Brandon left and released me into the woods, I was like, oh.
Hey! Well, and so you are actually currently at his house in Cincinnati right now?
In Columbus at his
In
parents.
Columbus, in Columbus. And so the two of you just recently went on a road trip to try and figure out your what's next. So where all did you head out on the road trip, and what cities are your top contenders?
Sure. So, we hiked through 14 states. We were like, let's drive through a couple more. And it's just a little bit faster. So we went out west to Denver, which we really enjoyed. Obviously, Denver is a very livable city if you have enough money to pay for rent, is the only downside. And then we went to Salt Lake City, Vegas, Phoenix, Austin, San Antonio, and I think that's all of them. Obviously, since we're outdoor nerds, we stopped in all of the national parks in Utah. Got a little hiking in while we were out there, but big fan of Denver and Phoenix. Both surprisingly livable. We got to drive around. I have a couple of friends that live in Denver that showed us around, and yeah, we'll see where we land. I think we just wanted to get a gist of places that we hadn't been to before, or only spent a small amount of time in. So yeah, it was fun to go see what else the country has to offer. Although I am such an East Coast girl, I'm like, can we just go back to Maine?
I mean, I'd come visit you.
Yeah.
I love Maine so
But
much.
as I am as a person, it's like, again, I'd like to push myself outside of my comfort zone. And I keep saying, if we move and we hate it, like East Coast and Ohio aren't going anywhere, we can always come back. It's just something new to try. And I'm lucky enough to do it with somebody who is super like-minded and I enjoy spending time with. And yeah, we'll see where we land. I'm letting Zach do all of the job searching. He does have that engineering degree, so I think he's going to have a little bit easier time finding something, and then I'll decide what I get to do.
Yeah, are you thinking about returning to bartending? Is it still on the table, off the table? Not really sure. Just gonna figure it out whenever you land somewhere.
Definitely still a little unsure. It was, I think I made this joke the other day with some other bartenders from Pittsburgh who were visiting Philly, that I've aged myself so much in the service industry that I've hit retirement before 30. Just because I did like dive in and like do so much. I went to so many conferences. I was president of our Bartenders Guild, all before 25. I'd only been in the service industry for a small amount of time, but it was my life. And I don't know, I think after the trail, I realized that I do need some separation between the things that I enjoy doing outside of work. And then also I would like to go to work and like not dread it. Like I want to be able to go to work and enjoy doing that every single day for the rest of my life, which I know is the dream. But I don't know. I'm not sure what that looks like. I will always hold hospitality in my heart. It definitely made me grow as a person, an adult, and I don't know. I love people. I love being a part of people's experiences, especially in restaurants and bars. And those places are my happy place. And if I get to provide that for other people, that's incredible to me. But at the same time, like I do have this biology degree, and I'm trying to find that middle ground between hospitality and science, and like what that even looks like. Because I don't want to be stuck in the lab for my job, because I think that would just not fulfill me as a person. So maybe something in a national forest, national park. Wine is always there. I obviously love wine, so I'm hoping to get some opportunities in the future, like working at a vineyard or helping with harvest or something, to see if that's in my wheelhouse of something I would enjoy. But I won't know until I try it. I keep telling myself that. It's this whole being an adult and finding my career is a learning process, and you keep doing it until you die, I think. I don't think it's good.
Well, you've already shown us that, hospitality shows up in so many different ways. And, I think you're very similar to me, where it's like, okay, I'm just going to figure this out and I'm just going to go on this journey. And, I'm going to make some goals. I'm going to go after it. But, you're just going to you're going to keep trying, you're going to keep asking, you're going to, and whatever your what's next is doesn't have to be what you're doing 5 years from now. It takes you to your what's next, which takes you to your what's next, and so on and so forth. So
I think I was very scared of that, in my early 20s, like, of failure in general. Like, if I didn't get it right the first time, like, I failed. And I think as I have grown as a person, like, I've realized, like, it's not failure. Like, it's not failing myself. It's not failing the people I work for. It's growth. And it's
absolutely
the best thing you can do for yourself is, I think, me recognizing that I'm not failing, I'm growing, is like a huge step in my life as a human being. So
that's an amazing lesson for everybody to take away. Well, Liv, I know that you have spent a lot of time in the outdoors this past year, but you've lived one hell of an amazing life for being in your mid-20s. What's your favorite venue? Can be anywhere.
Can't say my tent.
What's up?
I said I can't say my tent, can I?
If that is your all-time favorite venue, you most certainly can. I'm not here to judge.
No, I will have to say there is a bar in Pittsburgh called the Allegheny Wine Mixer. Yes, a little
is that
bit
from the Catalina Wine Mixer?
Yeah.
Is that okay?
Yeah. That is a little statement on their website.
But Allegheny that's one of the rivers.
The river and the county that Pittsburgh's in. So,
okay.
A great little wine bar. It's very quirky inside. They have all of these like felt paintings on the wall that are like these big-eyed children. It's just very quirky. The wine list is spectacular. They do a really good job at like making wine fun and approachable and non-pretentious, which I will speak to for hours if I could. So I would say, Allegheny Wine Mixer in Pittsburgh is definitely one of my favorite venues.
Oh, super cool. Awesome. Well, I'm really glad we were able to make this happen today. Will you please let our listeners know where they can follow you, and you can feel free to give Poe's Instagram a shout out as well.
Sure. So best place to follow me is probably on Instagram. It's at Olivia Jade. And then if you want to follow my cat Poe, which I think he's more entertaining than me, it's at Poe_day, like DE_creme. So Poe de Creme is his.
I love it.
He's the best.
He is the best. Well, Liv, thank you so much for joining me today. Listeners, thanks for tuning in. Please follow Beyond the Venue podcast on Instagram for all of our updates, and check out all of our episodes, seasons 1 and season 2, now streaming on all your favorite podcast platforms. Have a great day.